Hi everyone and welcome along. You can see Ant in the background getting the studio ready for filming, and today we are going to look at how you add backgrounds to flowers because it's something that I get asked an awful lot. Now if that doesn't make complete sense, here's a few little examples. So watercolour, obviously we think about painting onto a white unpainted paper background, but it's always lovely if you can add a little bit more atmosphere with a bit of a background. Now these are both current YouTube tutorials that we have on the channel, and we'll be linking to all the relevant examples in the episode notes below, but today we're just going to go over it and get you up to speed. So grab your paints and let's get started. We have so many flower painting tutorials on the YouTube channel and you can find them all in the flowers and foliage playlist, but what some of them have is painted backgrounds, and I just thought I'd show you a few of these before we get started today. So here we have a lovely glass vase of crocuses, and you can see we've got a really pale wash of a background. Now this one was able to be painted on nice and sort of lightly and pale around the edge of the vase, but we were able to paint the crocuses on top of this wash because it was so pale. So that's the first way that you can introduce a bit of a background. It's just by keeping it really nice and light and then painting your flowers over the top. So the wash first, flowers later. Then we've got a slightly more extreme version. Now this is quite uncommon in watercolour, seeing a really dark background with a lovely light flower on top, because of course watercolour is so translucent, water-based. Normally there's no way that a nice light yellow would show up on the dark background, but this is where we used masking fluid. So that wonderful masking fluid, the liquid that allows you to paint over an area, mask it off, paint a dark colour over the top, and then once it's dry you can peel away the masking fluid and you've got a lovely negative space to paint into. And all of these examples I'm showing you have their own tutorial, which you can find in the episode notes below and link straight to if this really tickles your fancy. So there we have a lovely example of using the masking fluid to create a very crisp area, put as dark a background as you want on first, and then use the space to paint a lovely light bright flower. And then I've got these two here. These were a bit more about painting the background a little bit more involved into the piece itself. So with the magnolia here, what I did is I drew the outline of the flower quite crisply, and then we painted in the wash as it went, and you can see lots of nice different colours that feature in the magnolia themselves, so you get this lovely sense of the crisp flower in the foreground and this sort of sense of a soft focus rest of the magnolia tree in the background. And then here, which was a quick fix a few months ago, the primroses, where you can see it's a little bit more stylized, scribbly, and the green of the leaves, you can see that it's sort of interacting a little bit with the background, bleeding into it. This was purposefully done where we painted in the flower and the background at the same time, and using the masking fluid to just create those nice crisp pale areas. So today I thought, whilst we're thinking about it, why don't we look at a live example? Here's a flower I painted quite a long while ago for another tutorial. Now, did you know that you can actually paint masking fluid on top of a dry painting? So normally I just use it on unpainted paper. Well, today I'm going to paint masking fluid over the top of this flower, because this is yet another way of being able to get a background onto a flower painting. So I felt like the pink delicate petals, it would be nice to really not have to worry about painting too sort of delicately around them and getting paint on them. So what I'm doing today is I've got my masking fluid and I'm just going to go around the edge of the flower. Now you could also mask the whole stem and leaves as well, but I've decided to just focus on the flower, and then I'm going to have a go at building up a wash around the edge, and just so I can show you then the difference, and if there is any, in having the freedom and that the masking fluid gives you of being able to paint just a little bit more freely around a painted item versus what happens when you're painting sort of around the edges or possibly over the top of the stem and the leaves. So I'm just going to paint that in and wait for it to dry 100%. And don't forget, when you're using masking fluid, it does tend to affect the bristles of your brush, so you'll want to sacrifice a brush or have a specific masking fluid applicator for the process. So the masking fluid is just tacky to the touch now, so that means it has dried. You can't rush these things. You need probably about 5 minutes to just let it do its thing. Now, we are going to place a wash of water on this page, and then what I'm going to do is a soft focus version of more of these pinky orange flowers to create the sense of more flowers in the background. Now, in terms of doing a wash, I've got a mop brush here, which is great for sort of doing large expanses. There's so many bristles here that when they pick up the water, they really slosh it all over the place. However, I was talking about sort of trying to be mindful of placing sort of the water or, you know, over the top of these leaves. And I think you just want to be a little bit careful. So what I'm going to do is I've got a size 6 brush here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with the control of this smaller brush, just paint clear water around the edge of the stem. Now, it doesn't matter so much if I go over the flower, because of course there's masking fluid on the flower now. But it is possible to get quite up close to the edges of things that aren't masked if you're using a pointed round brush. So you can see that the mop, you can get different sized mop brushes, but you can do much more with a pointed round brush. And then what you can always do, once you've sort of gone out the sides a little bit, then you can take your mop brush and do the rest of the area. So that water will just bead over the top of the pink flower. Now you can see the tiny bit of water that's touched the colour there, and so you can see how sensitive, even though this painting is months old, so it is 100% dry, it still potentially can be affected. So that's a really good sort of example showing you just how watercolour still likes to be reactivated even after months being dry and dormant. Okay, so now I've got a nice wet page, but it's not so wet that there's water puddling all over the place. It's just wet enough. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my permanent rose and I'm going to paint in a soft, loose watercolour flower on the wet page there. I've got a bit of cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, just trying to recreate a rough idea of this flower. It's funny, it looks a lot more orange with the masking fluid over the top of it. But that's nice. And the page is obviously wet, so the paint is feathering out, but it's not so wet that the paint is travelling to an extent that I can't sort of control it at all, and I can't see what it was meant to be. So different amounts of water on the page basically mean that the paint will travel or not. Now the other thing is we've got these deeper red sort of Alizarin Crimson streaks, so I'm going to pop some of those in now. And all of this is going to continue to sort of fade as it dries. Get paler and paler. Might just put like a little one up in behind, and you can see the page is starting to dry a little bit, but I can go right over this flower here, right over it again, because I've got the masking fluid on there. No problem. Okay, so that's a nice amount of pink, or maybe we'll pop in one more just down here. Also, it's good to just get a gauge of how the page is drying. So here I'm sort of going right up close, but I'm not purposefully scribbling my paint over the top of the stem, because I know that that has not been masked, and it's already shown that it can be susceptible to a little bit of movement. But now I'm going to take some greens and I'm going to start to paint in a few stems. And a few leaves. And I want the sort of the pinks and greens to start to sort of bleed into each other a little. And I'll put in some slightly darker colours. I've got deep sap green here as well, which is a fairly new colour in my kit, but I really like it. So yeah, just going to be a little careful coming right up there, but at the same time, if you do it with as few brush strokes as possible, you can get away with it. So right now this looks like a mess. But remember, it's all about creating this soft focus background for the flower. And actually, I quite like messes. So that is pretty nice. I'm going to just do a little sweep of the dark sap green there. Just come up on that one. That looks nice. So again, just being a little bit careful around the edge of the leaves, but I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to take some pure Paynes Grey. And just get in there behind the flower a little bit, just to give it a little bit more of a pop. And then maybe just a little bit sort of underneath some of these. Just helps that contrast, giving it a real sort of liveliness on the page. Okay, so we're going to let that dry 100% and then we'll peel off the masking fluid and see what we've got left. So I let that just dry naturally and then peel off the masking fluid. There we go. Oh, a tiny bit has come away with the painting. That's quite interesting, isn't it? So that's not a problem. We can just get that back in. But the thing I'd like you to focus on really is the fact that we've got this lovely crisp flower over the top of a really nice soft focus arrangement in behind it, and you can see also just adding in those dark little bits there has really helped that colour pop. So I hope you found this useful, and of course we have all the other background flower tutorials and many more that you can enjoy on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed. It's totally free. We've got hundreds of tutorials of all sorts which can inspire you with watercolour, as well as a playlist purely for beginners with loads of techniques and drills. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!